Now, in the telecom sector, the parent company of Vumatel and dark fibre, Africa Maziv, has secured a 25 billion rand loan led by Standard Bank for a fibre expansion initiative. Now, this marks the largest syndicated loan in SA's telecoms history, indicating that the group may outspend competitors in expanding its fibre network. Joining us to unpack this deal and how it will play itself in the industry is technology correspondent for Business Day, Mudiwa Gavaza. 25 billion rand, the only amount that I'm seeing in my bank account, then those numbers is 25 rand. It really just, signals how capital intensive this fibre network industry is. But my question is, does this loan indicate that there is enough sufficient investment supply to meet this investment demand?
So there's a lot of ways that you can sort of unpack what's going on right here. I think a couple of figures that make sense, as background is the fact that at the half year, because CIVH is owned by Remgro. So usually we have sight into the state of their business from Remgro's accounts. And just for the 6 months up to December last year, right, CIVH being, the parent of Maziv and all that, they spent 2 billion in that specific period, 2 billion on capital expenditure, which implied about 4 billion for the full year. And I say that simply because in the full year results they didn't tell us what the capex amount was, so you sort of have to imply it. So when it comes to this particular loan, the biggest unknown is what is the period around which they're going to be spending this 25 billion, because 25 billion is a lot. It's a lot. Even Vodacom and MTN, with their 10 billion a year that they spent over the last couple of years to get to the networks that they have, that was a ridiculous amount of money that they were spending. Now you have this loan. It probably shows you that it's going to be in effect for a couple of years at least.
I'm glad you mentioned Vodacom, because of course with Maziv and with this specific company that has attracted this 25 billion rand loan or funding is a matter sitting with the Competition Commission with regards to Vodacom. Is this aggressive, I would say, expansion inclusive of what might happen with Vodacom or not? Is the demand, is the strategy, is the capability there with or without Vodacom?
Okay, cool. So I'll answer it in 3 ways, right? There are 3 key pieces here. Firstly, you see that the Standard Bank is betting on the industry, right? When you look at the fact that Standard Bank has actually gone out and done other similar deals. Last year, they put 5 billion into Metro Fibre, right? Similar debt structure, that type of thing. And now 25 billion. And we are seeing that, for Maziv, right? So it seems they've taken an industry view around fibre. Second piece is obviously the fact that even without Vodacom, CIVH, Maziv, these are Remgro assets. So before you go anywhere, you are backing Remgro, right? But also at the same time, I can imagine that the analysts who put together this deal are also, bullish that the Competition Tribunal will allow this deal to go through, because that's what's stopping all of this is just the Competition Tribunal, coming out and saying, what, it's fine, let's push forward with this deal. So this 25 billion, it signals to me that there's a view from them, right? There's a view that, firstly, Vumatel and dark fibre on their own, strong businesses. But I think there's also, bullishness that they will be able to get the Vodacom deal done, come mid next year, because I think that's when the hearings are going to be.
If it doesn't go through, does this put Vodacom now on the back foot?
Yes, it does in a big way, simply because both MTN and Vodacom don't have a lot of fibre assets in the South African market. MTN is a little bit better placed in Africa, because on the African continent, they're actually competing with Liquid, because Liquid has always placed themselves as the infrastructure player when it comes to fibre on the continent. But they are racing at the moment. They have roughly 100,000 or so kilometers of fibre, both of them on the continent. Interestingly, both those numbers pale to Telkom's 170,000, right? So, which shows you how big Telkom, how far ahead, Telkom is. So without Vodacom, I think there's still a lot of growth. The real piece to consider is Vumatel has done very well in the cities, but there's a whole country that still needs to be fibered up, especially your secondary, what are called secondary cities. The likes of Vox have been quite aggressive in terms of going into some of those quote-unquote secondary cities. Think of towns in the Eastern Cape, for example. I went to school in the Eastern Cape in Grahamstown, now Makanda, and there was, strong fiber infrastructure, in that market. And those are considered to be secondary towns because that is not a Joburg. A Grahamstown would literally be the size of, maybe a suburb in terms of how many people are actually going to take up the fiber, compared to Cape Town, compared to Durban, compared to Joburg. So that's the other piece. A lot of guys have dug up the cities, but now they also need to provide fiber everywhere else in the country.
So we don't have much time, but before I let you go, then I must ask you, just about the fiber sector, well, the fiber part of telcos. That's where we are likely to see more growth. There's more room for growth there than maybe in the other parts, with definitely not voice, but of course with the other ones. Are we then expecting to see more activity, consolidation, funding deals such as these?
Funding deals, definitely. Like I said, Standard Bank, 25 billion here, 5 billion for Metro Fiber last year. RMB has also done a 2 billion rand deal with Octotel, which is a fiber provider that's mainly based and focused in the Western Cape. So, huge appetite on that end. IFC, International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank, has been funding liquid, telecom. They've done $250 million. They've also done CCOM, which is, so both of these are companies that we are familiar with because CCOM is a South African company. They do the undersea fiber cables, $260 million. So big, growth on that end. And then I think the last piece is just the fact that we often talk about fiber with relation to our homes and, your home network and office buildings such as this. But there's also the other infrastructure to consider. Your data centers, your network towers, all the cell phone towers that you see, let's say around Johannesburg, they're connected to each other using fiber cables, right? And then the data centers, all of this stuff, it needs, fiber in the ground. So there's a huge opportunity for these players, to continue doing what they do.
Well, thank you so much for your time and unpacking the structural shifts that we are seeing within that telecoms sector, particularly when it comes to the fiber network industry, Mudiwa. That was technology correspondent for Business Day, Mudiwa Gavaza.